I'm Chanale, and this is the weekly squeeze breakdown on Moral Edge. Okay, so I wrote a song while packing boxes, like actually packing boxes. Bubble wrap everywhere, tape guns, my kids' stuffed animals, and a full crisis negotiation. Fourth coffee of the morning, and out of nowhere, these words just started coming out of me. Have you ever felt a calling, a stir inside your soul until it gets so loud you can't ignore? And I'm sitting there in my half-packed Miami house going, yeah, I really have, for longer than I even knew. That song became I Am the Land, and it came out the day I landed in Israel. People have told me it made them cry, made them book flights, made them finally have the conversation with their spouse they'd been avoiding for 3 years, which is kind of insane to me because I wrote it while deciding whether the KitchenAid was worth the shipping costs. Spoiler, I did not take it, and I regret nothing. But here's the thing about the song. I didn't choose Israel the way you choose where to vacation or what job to take. I didn't make a list of pros and cons. Something in me already knew way before I was ready to say it out loud. The calling was there long before I answered it. And this whole episode is about that. About what it actually means to be here, what it costs Israel when we're not here, and what Israel needs from us right now that we keep sending the wrong version of. I have to tell you about my grandmother first, because you can't understand where I'm coming from without understanding where I come from. Her name was Miriam Selig, and she was one of the most extraordinary people I have ever known. She was born in Poland. She survived the Warsaw Ghetto and the camps. She was this little girl, blonde, blue eyes. And then one day the Nazis came door to door and burst into her home and killed her grandmother right there in front of her. The soldier who was left behind looked at this tiny child and saw something that reminded him of his own daughter. And he let her live. He let her live. At the end of the war, 15-year-old Miriam waited for her family to come back. But nobody came. Her entire family had been murdered. Every single one of them. A woman who had taken her in, who she called Matushka, a nanny, looked at this teenager who had nothing and nobody left and said to her, "You are a Jew." This nanny told her, "You have to go back to your people." So Miriam goes. Jewish orphanage in France, tries to get to America, visa rejected, boards a ship to Canada, arrives in Montreal knowing no one, gets taken in by a childless couple, gets a job in a sewing factory because, look, carefree Canadian teenage life was genuinely not where she was at after all of that. And at the train station, there's this young man, Joe Selig, refugee from Vienna, who just had this habit of showing up to help new arrivals. That's who he was. They met, they got married. And then Miriam did the thing I think about every single day. She went to the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, 18 years old, newly married, pregnant with her first baby, completely alone in the world. She sat down across from the Lubavitcher Rebbe and told him what she wanted. A big family, but she had no one to help. No family to help, no support system, nothing. And she asked him something so raw, I still can't get over it. She asked him if he would adopt her. And without hesitation, the Rebbe said yes. He became her family. And she went home and she built 10 kids, all Chabad, deeply, beautifully, committedly Chabad. Shabbos tables that could seat half the block. Grandchildren I genuinely cannot count without a spreadsheet. A life full of Torah and simcha and warmth you would never in a million years know what it was built on top of and what it took to get there. She had one thing that she allowed herself to say about the Holocaust, because she really didn't speak about it. But one thing she did say, she said, I am going to have as many kids as I can because I will never talk about it, but I have to do something about it. She said, I will never talk about it, but I have to do something about it. She just built 10 kids, dozens of grandchildren, a family spread across North America, committed to Torah, deeply connected to Israel, flying in for Chagim and for solidarity missions. And every time something happens, they're here. They're genuinely, fiercely loving this country. And all of those grandchildren, 3 of us actually live here. 3. I am one of them. I am one of the 3 grandchildren that live here. Now, I say this with so much love for my family. This is not an accusation, but just think about this for a minute. Miriam Selig survived a Nazi looking her in the face and deciding to let her live. She boarded a ship to a country she didn't even choose because the one she wanted wouldn't take her. She rebuilt herself from zero in a language she didn't speak, in a city she'd never seen. She asked a rabbi she never met to be her family. She had 10 children as her personal answer to the Holocaust. She raised every single one of them to love Torah and love Israel. And the pull of the diaspora, the jobs, the communities, the schools, the life that was already built and waiting was strong enough to hold them, almost all of them, in diaspora. This is not a criticism. This is the entire point of this episode, because if Bubby Miriam's grandchildren, raised on that story, steeped in that history, completely committed to that tradition, are mostly still not here, then what exactly are we waiting for? What should it take? What story would need to happen? I am her granddaughter. I am one of 3. And when I was packing those boxes in Florida, writing those lyrics, I wasn't just making a personal life decision. I was completing something that started long before I was born. My Bubby survived so her kids could live. Her kids lived so I could live. And I am here on this land with a voice and a platform and a family of my own. In the country that Matushka told a 15-year-old orphan with nothing and nobody that she had to return to. You must return to your people. I did. And I want to tell my Bubby this. Bubby, I really did. Her oxygen fills me. I breathe in her air, and no one can take it from me. I wrote that thinking about Israel, and now I realize I was also writing about her. So here's the deal with Aliyah. It doesn't knock politely. It doesn't send a calendar invite. Instead, it wakes you up at 2 a.m. with this obsession that you can't explain. And then you're watching Jamie Geller land in Israel on YouTube for the 4th time, sobbing like it's the first time. And you don't even know why you're crying. You just know something is in you. Something is saying yes to something you haven't fully named yet. And then it just hits you like a truck on the highway. Everything you thought you knew gets either flipped upside down or completely rearranged overnight, because suddenly you're not kind of thinking about it anymore. You are certain you are moving to Israel, across an ocean, in the middle of a war, not in the middle of the war. Sure, why not? Great idea. Let's go. And then you just take one step, one tiny arrangement, then another. You don't look at the whole staircase, because if you do, you will sit down on the floor and not move. And then one day, just like that, you're crammed into a 1-bedroom in your in-laws' house in Kiryat Sefer, while your sister-in-law's engagement party is happening literally on the other side of the door. Approximately 40 people in the next room, 0 square footage in this one, and you're sitting there going, how did I get here? But honestly, you're thrilled, completely exhausted, slightly feral, but thrilled. Do you know how she awaits us? To return to her once more, when finally her kingdom is restored. I didn't write that as a theological statement. I wrote it because that's what I felt in my chest. This land was waiting. It has always been waiting. And every Jew who shows up and says, okay, I'm here, I'm staying, I'm building my life here, they're answering something ancient. Look, I'm not going to pretend Aliyah is easy, because it's not. It's hard, it's chaotic and bureaucratic and expensive. And your Hebrew is going to be embarrassing for longer than you want. There's going to be days where you genuinely cannot figure out how a country that basically invented the whole tech industry still makes you fill out certain forms by fax. You will cry in the supermarket. And you will also have days where the light hits the hills at dusk in a certain way, and you will think there is nowhere else on this earth that I would rather be. Both of those things are completely true at the same time. And I am here because the calling got too loud to ignore. Because my Bubby story was living in my cells before I even knew how to name it. Because I am the land, and the land is mine, and I have 0 interest in living like a guest in my own inheritance. Israel does not need your money as much as it needs your body. I know that sounds blunt, maybe even a little rude to those people who have been donating so generously and consistently and feel like that contribution is real. It is real. It matters. It genuinely does. And it is not the same. This is the conversation that's constantly happening in religious circles. Someone brings up Aliyah and someone else goes, I do so much from here. I donate. I advocate. I go on solidarity missions. I raise my kids Jewish. I write to my senator. I matter from here. And then the person who brings it up says, yes, but have you thought about actually moving? And then it's a whole thing. Because somewhere along the way, we turned those two choices, living here and supporting from there, into a competition where everyone is defending their answer. And if you're defending staying, you have to argue it is equivalent. And if you live here, you can get a little insufferable about it sometimes. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I have seen both sides of this conversation at different points in my life. And I'm not here to run through that argument. I'm here to say the whole binary is wrong. The question is not whether giving from abroad is worthless. It's not. The question is what Israel actually needs right now and whether what we are offering actually matches that. And honestly, the match is off. Way off. Okay, let me give you the actual numbers because they're wild and they change how this whole conversation feels when you see them laid out. Normal year before October 7th, diaspora philanthropy to Israel is around $3 billion a year. Every year in peacetime, 1 in 3 Jewish adults in America donates something to Israel every year. In any given year, $3 billion. Then October 7th happens and the floodgates open. The Jewish Federations of North America alone raised over $600 million in the first month. $600 million in 1 month. Total documented donations in the first 6 months crossed $1.4 billion. The committee distributing the money was so flush, they literally could not turn down requests from Israeli charities as long as they met basic criteria. There was more money than there was channels to send it through. That's genuinely remarkable. And I mean that. But here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. That $3 billion a year, that's what gets donated. Charitably, it's a small slice of income from a fraction of the actual accumulated wealth sitting in diaspora Jewish hands. American Jews are the wealthiest religious group in the United States. About half of American Jewish households earn over $100,000 a year. More than 100 of the 400 wealthiest Americans are Jewish. No serious estimate of total American Jewish wealth is under $1 trillion. Some estimates are considerably higher than that. So now ask the real question. What if even a fraction of those people actually moved here? Not wired money, moved, brought their businesses, their professional networks, their venture capital connections, their earning capacity, their real estate investment capacity, all of it here. Here is your historical proof of concept. The 1990s, about 1 million Jews emigrated from the former Soviet Union to Israel. Almost none of them arrived with significant capital. They came with education, skills, and determination. That one single immigration wave is now credited with basically building the foundation of Israel's entire high-tech economy. The startup nation the whole world talks about, the one that punches way above its weight in tech and innovation and Nobel Prizes, it grew directly from that influx. They came here with nothing, and they transformed everything. Now imagine the Western wave, American, Australian, French, British Jews coming not without capital, but with it. A Jewish lawyer from New York making $400,000 a year who moves to Tel Aviv does not stop making money. They bring their capacity with them. They buy an apartment, which immediately adds to the tax base and the housing market. They pay taxes here instead of there. Their kids go to school here, serve in the army here, build careers and families here. They open businesses, they create jobs, and they bring their professional networks, which create more businesses. Every single one of those people is not just a donor. They're a multiplier, a walking, permanent investment in the future of this country. And here is the thing that $3 billion a year simply cannot buy no matter how many zeros you add. When the Soviet Jews came, Israel did not get their money or their skills. It got their decision. the permanent, committed, irreversible decision that this country was their future. Not just a place they supported, their actual future. That signal changed the psychology of the whole country. It told Israelis who were quietly thinking about leaving that smart, capable people were actively choosing to come here. And that matters enormously in ways that are hard to quantify, but very easy to feel. Immigration is not just economics. It's a vote of confidence in the existence and viability of the state itself. And right now, Israel is losing that vote from the inside at a terrifying rate. Between 2022 and 2024, over 125,000 Israelis left the country permanently, not temporarily, left. That's the largest loss of human capital in Israel's history in such a short window. The people leaving are disproportionately educated, secular, high-earning, kind of people who built the startup nation. And in 2024 alone, over 8,400 households formally canceled their Israeli residency status. 1 decade ago, that number was 2,500 a year. So here is the brutal math. Israel is receiving roughly $3 billion in diaspora philanthropy every year, and it's simultaneously losing around 60,000 citizens a year on net. You can't donate your way out of a demographic crisis. You can't fund your way into having enough people. The math does not work, and no amount of fundraising galas can fix it. But what can money actually not do? Well, money can't be on the train 6 a.m. to Tel Aviv when there's only standing room and someone is blasting Mizrahi music at full volume from their phone. Money can't show up at a shiva when the neighbor's son is buried. Money can't stand in the grocery supermarket checkout and notice that the woman behind you is shaking because a siren just went off. Money cannot vote. Money cannot argue at the city council meeting about whether they are building in your neighborhood or not. Money cannot volunteer at school when they need something. Money cannot be a body in the room when the room needs bodies. There's a Jewish concept called dat, which means understanding. A kind of knowing that comes from building inside something, fully inhabiting it. You can know about Israel from abroad. Plenty of diaspora Jews actually know more facts about Israel than Israelis do. But the knowing you carry in your actual body because you live there and breathe its air and your kids grow up speaking Hebrew and your whole life is embedded in this soil, that you cannot wire. You can't sell it. You can't write it off as a charitable donation at the end of the year. You just cannot. And the people sending the checks are in many cases exactly the people Israel needs to be receiving. Not their dollars, them. Let's talk about the halachic piece. There's a mitzvah called Yishuv Eretz, settling the land of Israel. The Rambam, one of the greatest halachic authorities who ever lived, lists it as a positive biblical commandment. Not a nice idea or a spiritual aspiration. It's a commandment that applies in every single generation, including this one, including when it is expensive and inconvenient, and your kids do not want to switch schools, and you don't know anyone, and the bureaucracy is insane. He says this mitzvah is equivalent to all others. All other commandments combined. That's not a small claim. Yet, most Orthodox communities treat Aliyah like it's a vague item on a to-do list they're getting to eventually, right after organizing the basement. Now, I want to talk about the Lubavitcher Rebbe here, the real one, not the bumper sticker version, because if you're Chabad or Chabad adjacent or raised in a community shaped by the Rebbe's teachings, you have absorbed a framework that says that you can be completely committed to Israel, supportive in your wallet, Zionistic in your heart, and still build your life in America or Australia or wherever you are. Now, the Rebbe discouraged mass Aliyah. He believed America was not exile in the traditional spiritual sense, that building Jewish life in the diaspora was itself holy and urgent work, that the mission of the shaliach, the emissary, was to be exactly where the darkness was the thickest. I understand that framework completely. I lived inside it for years. But here's what that framework leaves out. And this is the part I want to emphasize. The Rebbe never visited Israel after he became Rebbe, ever, not once. He led from Brooklyn from 1951 until his passing in 1994. 43 years, never left New York, not for one single day off. And when people asked him why, his answers were across different conversations over the years, all extraordinary. Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who served as chief rabbi of Israel, visited the Rebbe 4 times and asked him the same question each time. Why don't you come to Israel? The Rebbe's final answer to him was this. He said, the captain of an endangered ship is the last one to leave. Only after every passenger is safely evacuated does the captain have permission to go. So he was saying, I am in Brooklyn because the scattered Jews still need me here. When they're all accounted for, then I'll go. That's not indifference to Israel. That is a completely different type, a different kind of devotion to it. But here's what makes the Rebbe's commentary to Israel really extraordinary, because it goes way beyond the famous line. The same man who never set foot in Israel as its leader had detailed working knowledge of Israeli military terrain that stunned the top generals of the IDF. Ariel Sharon came to visit the Rebbe at 770 Eastern Parkway after the 6-Day War. Sharon assumed he was going to get a blessing from the Hasidic rabbi. What he found changed him completely. The Rebbe asked Sharon why 8 Israeli soldiers died in the Battle of Aliyah. Sharon explained that they had to cross a particular wadi, a valley, where the enemy was waiting. And the Rebbe looked at him and said, but why did you have to go through the wadi at all? And then proceeded to draw an alternative route for capturing that city, as if he had been studying regional military maps for years. Sharon later said he had never expected to find a military strategist of that caliber inside a Hasidic Rebbe. The meeting went on till early hours of the morning, and Sharon was not the only one making that trip to Brooklyn. Prime Minister Begin, Rabin, Shamir, Perez, and Netanyahu all made their way to 770 Eastern Parkway. Yitzhak Rabin, who was not a religious man by any standard, said afterward that he still remembered the Rebbe's blue, penetrating eyes that expressed awareness. The Rebbe spoke with tremendous pain about Israeli governments he felt were showing weakness, trading land for peace, looking to foreign nations for approval instead of standing on their own sovereignty. He said plainly and repeatedly that the land belongs to the Jewish people and no Israeli leader has the authority to give any of it away because it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to every Jew. He was adamant across decades that Israel must never cede territory under security pressure. He quoted the Shulchan Aruch to argue that even a border field cannot be surrendered because the moment you open any border, you endanger the entire land. And he said this in 1967, and in 1973, and in 1979, when Begin was negotiating with Egypt over Sinai. The Rebbe was in enormous pain over the Sinai withdrawal. He said it was a catastrophic mistake that would come back to haunt Israel. And he was right. Everything he said about that reads like a prophecy now. And then there's the Netanyahu story. When Netanyahu came to the Rebbe to say goodbye before returning to Israel in 1988, the Rebbe tried to talk him out of it. Said there were no good tidings coming from Israel, said the action needed was not happening there. He said Netanyahu could influence the leadership more effectively from his UN post than from inside Israel. But Netanyahu held his position. He said he intended to go back and work from within. And the Rebbe relented, gave him his blessing, and said, may your ascent to Israel be an ascent in every sense of the word. Ascent, the root of the word Aliyah. He knew exactly what he was saying and why he chose that word. So here's the full picture when you step back and look at all of it together. The Rebbe never went to Israel. He spent 43 years thinking about nothing else. He coached its generals, advised its prime ministers, argued passionately for its borders and its sovereignty with every tool he had from Brooklyn. He personally sent dozens of shluchim to live there. Here, he was personally responsible directly and indirectly for tens of thousands of Jews finding their heritage and making Aliyah. He poured his entire life into a land he never physically stood on as a leader. And the argument he was making from that position was this: be exactly where your presence is most needed. Which means the honest question for 2026 is not whether the Rebbe was wrong. The question is whether the same argument, be where you are most needed, leads to the same geographical answer today that it did in 1965. Because the world he was navigating had the diaspora at the center of Jewish institutional life. Shluchim were genuinely filling vacuums that did not exist anywhere else. That world has shifted, not disappeared, but shifted significantly. And I believe with everything in me that the Rebbe, with his extraordinary sensitivity to exactly where Jews were needed most, would be asking us that question right now. Not asking it for us, asking us to answer it honestly with ourselves, with our eyes open, in the reality of 2026 and not 1965. I have this conversation all the time with people I love. Smart, committed, Jewishly engaged people who have genuinely thought about Aliyah. And then they decided no. And when I really listen, the reasons are always real. The job is there. Parents are there. Kids are in the middle of school. Husband's business is there. Hebrew is embarrassing. Medical system is unclear. It's scary and I don't know anything and it's just not the right time right now. All real reasons, all of them real. I'm not dismissing them. But underneath the real reasons, there's always something quieter. A permission structure that got absorbed at some point without anyone consciously deciding to absorb it. This settled sense that supporting Israel from abroad is enough, that there is a legitimate version of committed Jewish identity in which this land is deeply personally meaningful to you without being the place you live, that the support counts as presence. And I want to push on that. Honestly, not because it's cynical or dishonest. I think it's very human and I understand exactly how that develops. But I think it was built for a different moment in history. And we're not in that moment anymore. And look, if you are an Israeli listening to this, I completely see the eye roll when diaspora Jews start giving speeches about what Israel needs while they're sitting comfortably in apartments on the other side of the world. That eye roll is completely earned. There is a version of this conversation that's condescending and useless and just another form of managing Israel from a distance. The people most entitled to demand more are the ones who stayed and served and keep receiving the tzav shlishi to come back to the army, while the same diaspora Jews who support Israel enthusiastically on Instagram send their kids to Ivy League schools in America. I'm not lecturing anyone. I moved here. I'm just asking you to stand next to me. I want to stand next to you. I am asking more of us to do that. There's a word that does not come up much at Shabbos tables in Flatbush or Teaneck. Yerida, descending from the land, the opposite of Aliyah. Traditionally in Halacha, leaving Israel carried real moral weight. The Rambam wrote that one should not leave except in extreme necessity. Extreme. Those were the halachic authorities who treated it as approaching a biblical prohibition. The language around it was never neutral. The direction of travel has always meant something in Jewish legal tradition. Going up or going down was not just a metaphor. Now, I'm not here to guilt anyone who left after October 7th for safety or sanity reasons. Life is complicated and Hashem does not keep score the way the internet people do. I mean that. But if you're living abroad and you have quietly absorbed the sense that the question is settled, that you made your decision and it is fine and nothing more is being asked of you by the Jewish people, by the Torah, by halacha, well, I would respectfully disagree. It is always said that this question is open. The land is waiting. The direction of travel still carries weight. And that deserves a real answer, not the comfortable one, the honest one. I moved here. I'm not objective. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here is what I believe, and I'm going to say it straight. Israel does not just need your support. It needs your presence, your actual, physical, daily, imperfect, annoying, productive, beautiful human presence. If you love this country, if you've been donating and advocating and feeling that low hum in your chest for years, I want to ask you the question I asked myself for way too long before I finally answered it honestly. Not, do you support Israel? That's too easy. Everyone in this conversation supports Israel, like our page. That's not what's being asked. The question is, why are you still not here? And if the answer is one of those real reasons, the job, the parents, the kids, the business, I get it. But ask yourself if whether that's actually the full story. Ask what would have to change for that not to be your answer in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. Because the window for organized, supported, accessible Aliyah is not open forever. History has windows, and they open and they close, and you do not always get the advance notice. This one is open now. The Jewish people survived 2,000 years without a state, without an army, without a land. on Torah and community and faith and stubbornness alone. That is a genuine miracle, and I mean that completely. But we have a state now, and an army, and a land. And it's ours in a way it has not been ours for 2,000 years. And it needs you, not your federation donation or your solidarity mission or your enthusiastic support from a safe space. Israel needs you. It needs your body, your presence, your decision that this is your future. I am the land. I am her oceans. These are my mountains. I stand on my ground. I am her nation. For we are the nation chosen by God. My home I have found. I found mine. Get on a plane. Make Aliyah. This is the Weekly Squeeze Breakdown on Moral Edge, and I'm Chanale.